This happened about 4 years ago when I was finishing up college. I found a cheap place to live off campus. It was a two-bedroom unit inside an old Victorian-style house that had been split into apartments. My roommate, Adam, was a quiet grad student who kept things to himself. We weren't friends, but he seemed normal, respectful, clean, paid rent on time. At least at first. The basement was the weirdest part of the house. It was unfinished, damp, and cold. The stairs creaked loudly with every step, and the light down there flickered like it was out of a horror movie. We were told not to store things down there because the landlord planned to renovate it eventually. But Adam was always down there. At first, I thought nothing of it. I'd hear footsteps creaking down the stairs at night and figure maybe he just liked working on stuff. He was into woodworking or some kind of DIY projects. That's what he told me anyway. But one time I went down to check the breaker during a power outage, and what I found scared the hell out of me. He had set up an entire space, like a secret room. Curtains hung from the ceiling to divide the basement into sections. One section had a mattress, another had a desk and a bunch of notebooks. But the weirdest part, he had my pictures down there, taped to the walls, printed from what looked like screenshots of my social media and even candid photos inside our apartment. The underground discovery terrified me. From that moment, I decided to leave. I knew my life was in danger. I didn't even go through everything. I backed out slowly and didn't say a word, but something brought me back. I just don't know why I went back there. I don't believe in black magic, but today, when I look at my experience of going back and forth to that house, I believe a spell had taken over me. I wasn't myself when I lived with him. That's how I feel. A few days after going back to the house, things escalated. Over the next week, I kept hearing the basement door open at odd hours. But when I'd check, it would be closed again. Adam stopped acknowledging me altogether. If we passed in the hallway, he wouldn't even say hi. He'd just stare, eyes wide, like he was waiting for me to say something. I couldn't sleep. I was constantly on edge, but I knew this would not end well. I was up late studying when I heard something downstairs. It wasn't footsteps this time. It was the sound of hammering, like someone was pounding something into the wall or floor. I quietly walked to the basement door and opened it. I called out, "Adam?" Nobody responded, so I slowly made my way down the creaky stairs. Halfway down, I realized the hammering had been nails. He was boarding up the door from the inside. He was trying to trap me. He looked up when I came into view and froze. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It wasn't panic. It was cold calculation, like he'd been caught too early. I turned and sprinted back up the stairs, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I ran to my room, barricaded the door with a table. He disappeared. But what they found in the basement was worse than I imagined. There were journals filled with rants about cleansing the house, about removing the temptation, and about me. He wrote that I was infected with lies and that he had to help me understand. He had detailed drawings of the apartment, notes on my schedule, and, most terrifying, a list titled The Doomsday. He planned evil, and I was the target. But before anybody intervened, he was gone. Efforts of finding him were unsuccessful. A few months passed by, but then I started feeling like I was being watched. I moved to a new place. I never saw him again, but I'll never forget that night. or how close I came to being locked in that basement, completely at his mercy. I hope I never see him again. This happened a few years ago during my last year of college. I moved into a two-bedroom rental house off campus with a guy named Eric. We didn't know each other well, but he came recommended by a friend. He was quiet, respectful, and paid rent on time. Basically, an ideal roommate at first. But a few weeks after we started living together, things started feeling a little off. I worked late shifts at a diner, usually getting home around 1 or 2 a.m. One night I came in tired from work. Just as I stepped into the living room, I saw a shadow move down the hallway. I figured it was Eric heading to the bathroom. But the bathroom light was off, and when I passed by, his door clicked shut like he had just gone in. It was weird, but I brushed it off. Then it started happening more often, but when I looked, nothing was there. Once, I found Eric standing in the dark kitchen, doing nothing, just standing still, facing the fridge. No cup, no phone. I asked, "You good?" He mumbled, "Thought I heard something." He responded calmly and went back to his room. Next morning, he was completely normal again, asking if I wanted to split groceries. It felt like two different people, daytime Eric and whatever the hell was walking around at night. Then it got worse. One night, I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. I opened it. There was no one I could see. I thought I was dreaming. So I texted Eric asking, "Did you just knock?" He didn't respond for a couple of minutes. Then he wrote back, "Nope, probably the wind, lol." I knew for sure what I saw and it was not the wind, so I started leaving my phone camera recording overnight. I really wanted to unfold the mystery. I wanted to uncover his weird behavior. That's how I caught him. I pretended to go to bed, left the phone recording by the lamp, and waited. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard my doorknob rattle. Then a slow push. I flung the door open. And there he was. Eric stood in the dark hallway. No shirt. Juts. A blank stare. Like he wasn't fully awake. "Oh," he said, "I thought you called me." That caught me guards down, like, for real, he was ignoring me or just trying to be funny. I found his response really weird. The next morning, I confronted him, told him to stop creeping around at night. He denied everything, tried to say I must have been dreaming. I showed him the video. He barely looked at it, then just laughed and said, "Weird." That was it. No apology, not another word. 2 nights later, he was at it again. I came home late from work and noticed my front door was unlocked. This was strange because I always locked it. Inside, things looked untouched, except for one detail. My phone charger had been unplugged. Small, but off. Then I saw like 3 noticeable muddy footprints from the front door to my bed. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m., I heard this unusual breathing outside my bedroom. Soft breathing. Not moving. Just breathing. I checked the camera footage. It was Eric. And again, he had no shirt. That was really frightening. I decided to leave. I feared that he may do much worse than trying to frighten me. I didn't even think. His behavior was unbearable. Too much than I could handle. I remember telling myself that there was no way I could live with a ghost. A friend told me later that Eric had been reported for stalking an ex. No charges were placed, but I've never been more certain that if I'd stayed even one more night, something bad would have happened. Something dangerous. This happened a couple of years ago when I moved into a new apartment with my roommate, Jake. At first, he seemed pretty normal, quiet, polite, kept things to himself. We didn't hang out much, but it was fine. Rent was cheap, location was good. The apartment was older, with creaky floors and weird layout quirks. One thing I noticed was Jake's bedroom closet. It was huge and oddly deep compared to mine. I thought it was weird but didn't really care. One night after Jake had gone out, I was cleaning the main room. I entered to his room and opened his closet door. I noticed something strange. At the back, behind some old coats, there was a faint outline of a door. Curious, I pushed against it and, to my shock, it swung open. Behind the door was a hidden narrow staircase going down. My heart raced. I called Jake to ask about it. His response shocked me. He just laughed and said it was probably an old storage space from when the building was a house. But something didn't sit right with me. I decided to check it out later when Jake was out. Down the stairs was a small, dimly lit room. It smelled like mold and dust. But what freaked me out was the stuff inside. There were notebooks, old photos, maps of the neighborhood, and more pictures of me. They were printed from my social media, showing me walking home, sitting in the living room, even sleeping on the couch. I found handwritten notes next to each picture, describing what I was doing and when. I was terrified. Why was Jake spying on me? How long had he been doing this? I went back upstairs and checked my phone for messages or calls from him. Nothing suspicious. That night, I stayed awake, feeling watched. At around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. I peeked through the door crack and saw Jake standing there, staring at my door with a weird smile. I asked him what he was doing, and he said nothing, then slowly walked away. The next day, I asked him about the hidden room. He downplayed it again, saying it was just a safe place for his projects. But I wasn't convinced. I started noticing other strange things. My personal items would be moved. My texts would sometimes disappear or be read without my knowledge. He was always around but never talked much. I finally decided to move out. Before I left, I took pictures of the hidden room and the notes. I filed a police report, but Jake was already gone by then. I still get chills thinking about how close I was living to someone who was stalking me inside my own home. The hidden room was a nightmare I never expected. I learned later that he did some dark rituals inside the mystery room at night. To this day, the thought of living with a superstitious roommate continues to haunt me. Two summers ago, I moved into a cheap sublet during an internship. It was a 3-month rental in a rundown house with 2 other roommates. One of them, Julia, was cool. But the other, a guy named Brent, gave me weird vibes from the start. He wasn't rude, just quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you notice how much he was watching. The house was old, with thin walls and creaky floors. My room was next to Brent's, and every night I could hear him pacing or moving furniture around. It sounded like dragging, heavy stuff. I thought maybe he was redecorating or something. This went on for weeks. One day I asked if everything was okay. He said, "Yeah, just organizing my tools." I didn't expect that response. I never saw any tools, just boxes stacked up in his room and blackout curtains on every window. One evening, I noticed a small hole in my wall. It was behind a poster I'd just put up. I hadn't noticed it before. A clean, perfect little circle in the drywall right at eye level with my bed. I moved the poster aside and looked through it. Complete darkness on the other side. But the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't just a hole. Someone drilled it intentionally. That really terrified me. The hole went across to Brent's living room. That night I couldn't sleep. I pulled the poster off completely and stuffed paper into the hole. But I couldn't shake the image of someone watching me through it while I slept. I brought it up casually to Julia the next day. She got real quiet and said, "You know, I always get this weird feeling like he listens to us through the vents. Sometimes I swear I hear unusual movements." She wasn't kidding. That night, we both sat quietly in the living room, and from the vent behind the couch, we heard these unusual footsteps. They sounded really frightening. We didn't sleep that night. I decided to search my room the next morning while Brent was at work. What I found sent chills across my whole body. In the closet behind a loose panel, I discovered wires. Tiny, thin cables for audio or cameras running along the wall right near the drilled hole. I realized that he wasn't just watching, he was recording as well. Julia and I were very angry. We felt used, violated, and abused. We decided to confront him. We stood by his door and told him we needed to talk. No response. We knocked harder, still nothing. But I heard movement inside. I tried the knob. Locked. We stayed by the door a few more minutes. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the back door bang shut. He ran and disappeared into the night. Then, we realized that he had been watching both of us for weeks. We found 2 folders containing dozens of video clips. He'd set this up long before I moved in. Julia had been living there for almost a year. She had no idea he was watching her every night. We couldn't believe what we saw. He never came back. Apparently, Brent had a history of mental health issues and had been evicted from a previous place for privacy violations, but no charges were filed at the time. That horrifying encounter has changed the way I look at roommates. Today, I think I just can't trust anyone. I am especially more cautious when meeting new people.